I will say though, Mike Wazowski, probably, if not, the biggest simp in cinema history. What do you think of that statement? It's a bold statement. What other simps can we think that even rival
Mike Wazowski.
the simpness of Mike Wazowski?
I didn't even think about that.
I mean, Anakin Skywalker, perhaps?
Nah, it doesn't even live up to Wazowski, bro.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Rewatch podcast. My name is Samuel.
And I'm Jaden.
And this is a podcast where we rewatch classic or current films every week and then decide whether they deserve a rewatch from you. Before we begin, a like on this video would be most appreciated. You can subscribe if you'd like. If you are tuning in on Spotify or another major podcast app, you can find us on YouTube by searching The Rewatch. So thanks to our lovely fans who, well, I say fans, audience members, friends essentially, for voting on Instagram as to what we rewatched this week.
Yep.
There was a 50-50 tie.
Bit of a dilemma.
Yeah, so that was a shame because we threw it to the audience because we didn't really want to pick between the two.
Yeah.
And then we sort of had to pick it anyway, but that's okay.
We will be doing the other one soon, so not to worry.
Yeah, so this week we're doing Monsters, Inc., and which was originally, I think, suggested by Justine, and then and Ava suggested Ice Age.
Mm-hmm.
But then in the poll, I saw that Ava actually changed her mind to Monsters, Inc. So we're going with Monsters, Inc. We had a sort of a vote between the two of us as well.
Yeah.
We decided this is the one that we wanted to do this week, but I'm sure we'll get to Ice Age eventually. Yeah. So in order to power the city, monsters have to scare children so that they scream. However, the children are toxic to the monsters, and after a child gets through, two monsters realize things may not be what they think. And this was a movie that was released in 2001, which was in fact the same year that another famous animation movie was released.
Yes.
And that being Shrek.
Yep.
So interesting. I think there's a discussion to be had about perhaps which one is the best later on, which I think will be interesting to get into, hear your opinion about that one.
Yep.
So this film was nominated for Best Animated Feature, but it actually lost to Shrek.
Oh, really?
We'll get into whether that's fair enough later on. But it was also nominated for Best Original Score, which I think I sort of have a problem with, and Best Sound Editing.
You got a problem with that?
Oh, yeah, no, I do.
Okay.
I do. So characters in this movie, we'll go through them quickly. You've only got two that we'll highlight. So we've got Sully and we've got Mike Wazowski. So Sully is voiced by John Goodman,
Mm-hmm.
who is not really a household name, but you'd know him if you saw him. He's a very prominent actor. He's probably most notably in The Big Lebowski, but he does a lot of voice work. So he's in like Princess and the Frog. I think he's in Cars.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's just in lots of different things for as a voice character.
Yeah.
And voicing Mike Wazowski is Billy Crystal, and so I had no idea who this was, but he's in Analyze This, which is a gangster movie with Robert De Niro. So the two of them obviously quite prominent actors.
Yeah.
And this is, but I think this is probably what they're known for.
Yeah, this is definitely what they're well known for.
Yeah. So but all around, I think good voice performances. I think Billy Crystal as Mike Wazowski is really good.
Billy Crystal was in Cars, apparently.
Yeah, it's because at the end of Cars, there's a post-credit scene where the cars are in a drive-through movie and they're watching all of the different Pixar movies, but in Cars form. So
Gotcha.
it's
Yeah, yeah. It
the
says
first, yeah, the
yeah,
first one is like Toy Story, and it's like you are a toy car. And
yeah.
it's like Buzz and Woody in cars.
Because Tom Hanks is in the credits for Cars as well, and it says Woody
Yeah,
Car, and then there's Billy Crystal says Mike Car.
yeah. It's because they've got all different sort of cameos across all Pixar movies, which is great, really.
Didn't know that.
So let's go to sort of our general thoughts. Give us your opinion, Jaden. What did you think of the film? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I actually really enjoy this film. Obviously, I kind of watched it. I was growing up. This is the sort of films that we watched when we were young. Um, I do think it's one of Pixar's best films.
Okay.
And I'm not going to say what it stands alongside because we're going to do episodes on them as well. But no, I really like this, and I like the characters in this and how they kind of interacted with one another. In
Mm,
particular, I do think that the relationship between Sully and Boo was quite well done. Um, and the story as well, you don't see this anymore. I mean, it's just such a unique and weird story, but it works so well.
yeah.
And I also love the music by the in this film by Randy Newman, who has also done themes from other Pixar films such as Toy Stories, You Got a Friend in Me. So he
Yes,
makes really good stuff.
for sure. I don't know. It's definitely one of the best Pixar movies ever, but it never really comes to mind when you think of a Pixar movie for me for some reason. Like,
Oh, really?
I feel like it's always overshadowed by Toy Story and Cars and everything like that. Like for me, I think I know the reason why that is the case. It's probably because Toy Story and Cars are so easily monetized, and by that I mean there's toy cars and there's toy Buzz Lightyears
Yeah,
and Woodies like all over the place. And unless you were to get like a teddy bear version of Sully, like why would you want any of
yeah,
these
that makes
characters
sense.
as like a figure?
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's probably why, in terms of like the major Pixar properties, Monsters Inc.'s never really up there for me personally. Like it never really comes to mind, which is
Mm.
weird. But it is. I did enjoy watching this again. I think I watched it earlier this year, and no, I was pleasantly surprised by how it sort of holds up. And I've watched the prequel since. Watching the first one earlier this year,
Hmm.
and the prequel was all right. It was all right.
It's
Um,
definitely not as good as the first film, but
yeah,
it stands up as a sequel. So yeah.
yeah, for sure. And so no, I really enjoyed it. I think highlights for me were Mike Wazowski, just in general, like his comedy
Mhm.
and the witty dialogue between Wazowski and Sullivan was like reminded me a bit of Shrek and Donkey.
Yeah,
And it's sort of like this has been lost by Pixar in recent times. It's the hilarious dialogue. Well, it's not like dialogue that's going to make you laugh out loud, but it's just like so cleverly written,
yeah.
and we just don't get that anymore. Like we've done Coco and we've done Onward, and there's just nothing like that in those movies.
Yeah, and I do think that's partly because of the fact that some of the Pixar writers who were doing stuff, like Toy Story and the earlier films, I think a lot of them may have passed away or just moved on to other jobs. So I don't think they've got the same uh division of people as they did back in the day working for them now.
Yeah, for sure. And because you brought that up, I'll just John Lasseter, who's like one of the most prominent people at Pixar.
Yeah.
Like, name any good movie. To be fair, name any bad Pixar movie, and John Lasseter produced it.
Mm.
And he's recently been like shoved out the door because there was a scandal because he gave somebody a hug when there was restrictions on,
Hmm.
and so like Disney sort of tried to push him out, and then they've uncovered some things about misogynistic behavior in the past and everything like that. Basically, like your classic Hollywood executive stuff, like just a creepy old guy. So that's a shame that he's
Yeah.
leaving. Obviously, I don't know too much about his situation. But for me, I think that's probably going to be the death of Pixar if John Lasseter leaves, because he's such an integral
Iconic.
part of
Yeah,
the team.
he kind of made Pixar what it was.
Exactly. And it's just really sad because, Disney, they've certainly declining. We've seen with the release of the live action Mulan has been absolutely torn to shreds by critics. It's made no money whatsoever.
Mm.
It's been called unoriginal, uncreative, like just boring. And we get now from Disney is live action remakes and sequels. We've said it before and we'll say it again. And it's such a shame
It's not what we want,
because
yeah.
they can really create magic if they, take a shot in the dark at new IP and stuff like that.
Which is interesting now that you're bringing this up, because they have just released the trailer for Raya and the Last Dragon, I believe,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
honestly doesn't look too bad, and I'm just happy that it's, not a sequel or a live action, because I'm getting kind of sick of those.
For sure. And we also have Soul coming out
Oh, yes.
soon-ish, apparently. That's going to be released straight onto Disney Plus, so it's not even going to theaters, which is a major thing in itself. Perhaps like a more broader topic for another time, but that's crazy. The fact that we have so little new IP from Disney,
Mm.
and now it's just going to go straight to streaming, so it's not even going to get the publicity that it deserves.
I think
And
that what they're going to do there, though, is with Mulan, I think they made it a paid subscription, not a paid subscription, but you have to
yeah,
pay to
yeah,
watch it. And I think it
yeah,
was around $30 or something, which is just absolutely ridiculous. And I really
for
hope
sure.
that they don't do that path anymore, because people who have Disney Plus, they're already paying for that content. And, obviously they have to make some sort of revenue on these films. But I think there's just a load of better ways to go about it than making us pay again for a film that, maybe we want to watch, maybe we don't want to watch.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just seeing here. It's going to go to straight to Disney Plus with no extra charge. So
Oh, sweet.
that's good for the consumer. But then you got to think like where obviously Disney Plus is going to be a gigantic revenue for Disney,
Mm.
but how does that movie itself, like, it's not going to make any money specifically to that movie, so it's a real shame. Like, there's going to be no revenue tied to Souls, and they're not going to be able to say, well, Soul performed really well at the box office, so
Mm.
let's do more new ideas, guys. But whatever. It's a shame, really. Decline of Disney, but back to the glory days, back to
Yeah.
Monsters Inc. I really like the ending of this movie. Very
Oh,
wholesome.
I love it. Yeah.
And for once, we actually get a movie that actually ends perfectly, like with no loose
Mm.
ends and like nothing. It like the problem in the movie is just solved, and everything's happy,
Yeah.
and then it ends,
Yeah.
and then it actually ends.
Yeah.
It's not like Shrek, who's like happily ever after, and then a couple of years later, they're like, "Oh wait, new problem."
Yeah, here's another film. And I mean,
Yeah,
it's been 19 years since we've got another film, after the original. We've gotten a prequel, but that doesn't involve, Boo or any of the characters that we've seen in this film. And it's been
Mm.
19 years since we've gotten an extension to this story, which is honestly perfect. I really feel that they don't need to go any more into this story because it ended so well.
Yeah, yeah, and perhaps that is why you know when the question is posed, like, is this one of Pixar's greatest movies of all time? I think it probably is up there.
Mm.
But I think the fact that it doesn't have any sequels actually works against it, because it means that it's not like in everybody's mind, because there's not like a Cars 3 coming
Yeah.
out. There's not like a Toy Story 4, and good heavens, like so many bloody Toy Story movies. But this just ended nicely, and they were like, you know what? That was a good story. We've told it. The end.
Yeah.
If only studios would do that nowadays.
Mm. Yeah, and
Joker.
joke. I think that's responsible that they honestly went with the path of getting a sequel. No, not a sequel, a prequel for this film, because it was probably the best that they didn't touch what had already been concluded. And
Mm.
obviously, when they're thinking about whether we should make a prequel or whether we should make a sequel, I think that's what should go into it. Has this film been wrapped up? Has it finished? Should we touch that? Or can we add to this story by making a prequel and creating new characters that these people already like, that's set in the same universe? So I think it was quite a good idea to go with the prequel for this film.
For sure. And as a devoted The Amazing Spider-Man 2 fan, I will say that perhaps one of the worst things a studio can do in a movie is set up the sequel.
Mm.
So thank God that this movie never had any intention of doing that whatsoever. It just
Yeah.
had the intention of telling a good story, and it does that. All right, so we'll dive a bit into the plot then. First off, would you say to our audience that this deserves a rewatch? If they have Disney Plus, and perhaps most people probably haven't seen this movie in about 10 years. So, do you think it's worth going back to?
Oh yeah, I mean, I would definitely say so, and that kind of ties into my rating that I've given this film as well. I mean, everyone knows Monsters Inc., and I think a lot of people know that it's one of Pixar's best works. So if you got the time and you just want to sit down and watch a film that's nostalgic, this is definitely one of those films you should go for.
For sure. All right. So one of the best quotes I think in the movie is said by the big bad guy, the CEO of Monsters Inc.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very early on in the movie, and he says, "There's nothing more toxic and deadly than a human child."
Human child, yeah.
And doesn't that just resonate with everybody? I will say, when I was first, in that first sort of 5 minutes, I noted two things. Number one is that the animation is a lot worse than I remember.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of Toy Story's animation, which came out I think 6 years prior to this film. So they hadn't changed much, but they did improve the fur animation, which is quite revolutionary for that time.
Okay, yeah, well, because Toy Story 2 was released 2 years before this movie came out. This might be a bit of bias on my part for creeping in, but I do think Toy Story 2 has better
Has
animation.
better. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's probably because there's no fluffy monsters in Toy Story 2,
Yeah.
and there are definitely times in Toy Story 2 where you're like, oh, that animation is not good.
Mm.
Especially whenever there's humans involved, it's really you can just tell that the animation was just not up to the task with human faces. But to be fair to the movie, after that 5 minutes or so, I'd completely forgotten that the animation was worse than I remember.
Yeah.
So credit to the movie for that.
Yeah.
Because you just get immersed and then you just forget about
You
the
forget
animation
about it,
even
yeah.
being there. For sure. And the second thing that I noted was in that first 5 minutes, obviously the premise of this movie is quite complicated, and by complicated I mean just different. There's a lot of questions from the audience being asked, is this in the human world? What's the deal with these monsters? Why are they scaring kids? And the film answers all of those questions so seamlessly, in that first 5 minutes.
Mm.
I just found that just through the TV, news flashback, the news
Yeah.
stories,
Yeah.
and the monster training at the start of the film. And and then obviously we see Mike Wazowski in the advert that sort of explains what Monsters Inc. actually is.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really well done.
It was a good way to set it up and kind of explain this, whole, world in a way, to introduce the audience to this confusing world in the short span of 5 minutes, which is really hard to do, but they pulled it off.
For sure. And I mean, I don't want to compare this to Inception, but I'm going to anyway.
I know.
And in Inception, what they do to try and explain what the movie is about is they bring in somebody who has no idea, and they're like, so how they recruit? Oh, you wouldn't know because you haven't watched it.
Mm.
And that they recruit like there's this team of like super smart spies doing all this like crazy stuff, and they recruit just like a normal person, and that normal person is always like, what on earth is going on, Leonardo DiCaprio? And he's like, let me tell you. And so then he just like explains everything that's going on to that person, but really that person represents the audience, because the audience is like, what on earth is going on, Leonardo DiCaprio?
Yeah.
And so I think that this movie actually tries to explain it in a bit of a more creative way. So credit to the film for doing that, because they could have just, had like, some human stumble in and like, what on earth is going on? Or just some like naive monster or something. So credit to the film for doing that. Did you think that Mike Wazowski is actually like funny, or was it as funny for you as Shrek and Donkey? Perhaps that's a good question.
Look, when I was 6 years old or whatever, it probably would have been the funniest thing in the world for me. But living up to how old I am today, this film probably isn't intended for me. So he's definitely not the funniest character out there. And it's unlike Shrek, whereas Shrek's actually made for a more mature audience as well as kids. That comedy between Donkey and Shrek was, meant to be more mature. And you can kind of tell that Monsters, Inc. isn't meant to be like that. It's just purely for children. So I'm probably going to say no, Mike Wazowski isn't the funniest character out there. But I can understand how, when I was young, how I would be laughing at his jokes.
Yeah. There's a couple moments that I do actually find really funny in the movie. It's the one moment where it's like, always watching.
When Rise or whatever her name is.
Yeah, whoever the snail is.
Yeah.
So funny. And because Mike Wazowski like goes up to her and he's like, oh, you're looking great today. Did you do something with your hair? It was with your hair. And she's like, not having any of it.
Yeah.
She's like, where's your paperwork, Wazowski?
Have you returned your paperwork, Wazowski?
So yeah, and also memes appear in movies when either the movie is really good or the movie is really bad. There's no in between. You don't get memes of mediocre movies.
Yeah.
They're either really good or really bad. So take, for example, all of the Rey memes that come out of, every single bloody sequel Disney movie with Star Wars. And then take, for example, like The Revenge of the Sith, the most memed movie in history.
Yeah.
People meme that because they love it. So memers either go for movies they love or movies they hate. And in this instance, we have a great meme, which is The Walkout. And where they're like, oh, the scarers are coming. And there's like this really slow-mo walkout with like Sully and his boys. And you just feel like Danger Zone from Top Gun should start playing as they walk out.
I've seen so many memes about that.
It's like, I think my favorite one is probably always the dodgeball meme, where it's like, probably a bit sexist in nature, but it's like when the girls play dodgeball and they're like, oh, don't hit me, and like when the boys come to play dodgeball and it's like Sully and his boys walking out.
Or like me and the boys preparing for a Nerf battle war or something like that.
Yeah, fantastic. So this is definitely a movie that people love, and thus, memes are created because memes don't happen themselves. People go back and they watch these movies again and they think, that's a funny moment, or how can I take that out of context?
And
then put it in. So you don't get memes of the original trilogy, for example, but that's not because people don't really love those movies, but it's because there's just not that massive sort of fandom constantly around those particular movies. Sure, there's still some memes, but point is, memes either come from good movies or bad movies, and this is a good movie, good meme.
And possibly one of the most longest lasting memes that is still relevant is the photo where Sully's and Mike's faces have been swapped over. And have you seen that? And Mike has like two eyes and he's standing there.
Yes.
That's still going today somehow, and it's still relevant.
I completely forgot about that one. That's fantastic. Yeah. Oh, that one's always coming up.
Yeah.
Like, I scroll through my Insta feed right now, I could probably find
You'd
that
find
somewhere.
it, yeah.
Like, it's crazy. So another great example. Another really funny moment was we have a 230. Oh, it's like 2319, 2319, and they come in and they shave the monster, and because he's got a sock on his back.
Yeah.
And then it happens again, and he's like, "We have a 2319," and the guy just like strangles him and throws him out.
Yeah, George, he's getting sick of it.
It's so good. That poor monster. I remember watching that, being like, "God, poor guy, he just can't catch a break." Which I thought was really funny because, you know, once they get like a human sock on them or something, like the yellow like decontamination people like pop in from the windows and like rappel down, and it's all like a massive deal.
The CDA, I think it's called, the Child Detection Agency.
Oh yes, yeah. No, they're great. Everything in this movie like really has sort of like a charm and wit about it. So that's a just massive credit to the movie. I will say though, Mike Wazowski, probably, if not the biggest simp in cinema history. What do you think of that statement? It's a bold statement. What other simps can we think that even rival
Mike Wazowski?
The simpness of Mike Wazowski.
I didn't even think about that.
I mean, Anakin Skywalker, perhaps?
Nah, it doesn't even live up to Wazowski, bro.
Mike Wazowski has one priority in his life, and it's his girlfriend that I can't
Celia,
name.
or whatever her name is.
Oh, yes, Cecilia. Yeah, that's funny, though. Mike Wazowski, you simp.
How are you like taking notes on the film and then that comes into your mind?
I just had to say, I just had to put it out there, and I'm just trying to think of some other egregious examples of simping in cinema history, but there's just none coming to mind at the moment. But
neither.
I'll have to think about that some more, perhaps get back to you. But another piece of dialogue that I really liked from Mike Wazowski is when Randall, the bad guy, and I will say about Randall, the fact that he can go invisible is a really good, like villainous trait to have, because you know we fear what we can't see, and you know we fear the unknown, and you know all that philosophical nonsense. So when we can't see Randall, it's actually quite scary without being too intimidating for children.
Yeah.
So, and then because then Randall just like appears out of nowhere, and we're always thinking like, oh, is Randall going to be around that corner? Is he going to catch them? Everything like that. So I think that was a cool way to make Randall scary without making him actually scary.
Yeah.
But regardless, at one stage he has Mike Wazowski up against a wall, and they're sort of figuring out what to do with Boo, and he's like, "What happens in 5 minutes, Wazowski?" And Wazowski's like, "I get time out." And he's like, "No, you idiot! Everyone goes to lunch." And what happens to the scare floor when everyone goes to lunch? And Mike Wazowski's like, "It gets painted." And that's usually a really, like, that sort of scenario is a really common thing in movies that are trying to be funny.
Yeah.
Like, you'll have a really, really serious guy asking a really serious question to a not so serious guy.
Yeah.
And the stupid guy's like, just gives like a bizarre out of whack answer, and it's supposed to make the audience laugh.
Yeah.
But how the line is executed here by both voice actors, like I found that quite funny. It was probably a highlight of the movie because it was just like you just didn't expect like him to be like, it gets painted.
Yeah.
Like, that's just such a weird, like, what?
Yeah.
So I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
But are there any other moments where like you really enjoyed the humor in the movie?
Just trying to think off the top of my head. Yeah, another meme that I came across, which was quite heavily memed back in like 2017 or 2018, I think, was the one scene where Mike Wazowski's like speaking to like the little monsters, like the children, and then one of them like bites his finger, and he's like, Mike Wazowski, and then he bites it, and then he like screams, and that was like memed like a lot because like people edited like over the top of his scream like different clips and such.
Okay.
But like
Yeah.
that doesn't even have to do with the humor in the film, so
Yeah.
um,
It's just a meme.
um, yeah, none really come out to me in terms of making me laugh, but
Yeah.
it's kind of things that weren't meant to be funny that I kind of laughed at because my
Yeah, yeah.
changed since I was, really young. So yeah,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's like a bit in Joker. I
yeah,
know when there's certain things in Joker when like really bad things happen to the character, I'd be like, "Oh, that's terrible," and you'd like
yeah,
laugh. I'd be like, "Oh, that's so tragic. You just walked into that door."
yeah. Oh,
I will say though that the relationship between Sully and Boo
mhm.
is, I mean, they're obviously trying to make it so adorable,
Yeah,
and I mean, they just completely just do that.
they hit the
Like,
nail on the head, really.
yeah,
Yeah,
there's nothing better they could have done. And obviously, they've crafted Boo to be like this Puss in Boots sort of like
yeah,
adorable in every sense of the word character,
mm.
so that the audience like really, gets behind her and Sully and their relationship. So
That works
I
so
think,
well.
yeah, it was really, really good.
Mm.
And I got a major parallel between Pixar movies when Sully is chasing after Boo, and Boo goes into the trash compactor,
Hmm.
and like her eye gets stuck in there, and then Sully thinks that she's been like made into trash.
Crushed.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah. And all I could think of was the start of Toy Story 3 when Woody is running after the toys who are in a garbage bag, and the garbage bag gets thrown into a truck and then crushed,
Oh yeah.
and Woody's standing there, he's like, no.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And then obviously the subversion of expectation is that they're not actually crushed, like they're fine, they're just behind him,
Mm.
and that's the exact same thing here. So that was interesting to see, sort of like a parallel sort of Pixar copying themselves there a bit.
Mm.
Um,
That's quite good. I didn't pick up on that, but yeah.
yeah, I just couldn't help it. I was like, oh, that's just so Toy Story 3, and I'm like, hang on a minute, I should be getting mad at Toy Story 3 for doing that
Yeah,
because that one came
it
second. Like,
preceded it. Yeah,
yeah, so but that's okay. Pixar are entitled to copy their good
their own
work.
films. One thing I did
Yes.
pick up on though is a reference to Jurassic Park. You know the scene where um, Sullivan and Boo are hiding from Randall under the desk after Randall kidnaps Mike from inside the door.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so they're hiding under the desk, and then Randall kind of like appears
Oh,
alongside them, and like he comes out of his invisibility there. Remember
yeah,
that? Yeah.
yeah.
So that's actually, I think it's a reference to Jurassic Park where um, Tim Murphy is kind of hiding behind this kitchen counter, and the raptor like sticks its head around the side of it, and it's like
Yeah, yeah.
talking. I think it's a reference to that, but I could be wrong. We'll chuck the image up here if we could find it.
Yeah, and well, I will have trouble finding it considering I have not seen those movies, but I will. I'll try. You might have to send it to me.
I think I
I
might have it here, so I'll quickly send you a message on it.
Yeah, because I haven't seen the Jurassic Park movies, and I think they're all on Netflix. So definitely on my to-do list because they are, if I'm not mistaken, it's Spielberg, right? The Spielberg did
Yeah,
the Jurassic
yeah.
Park movies. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, definitely got to check them out. But yeah, even as you said, the reference, I sort of thought, okay, of course, that's like a
Yeah,
reference to a dinosaur
yeah,
being like right there
yeah,
and they're hiding. Like it makes a lot of sense. So yeah, so that will definitely chuck that up for the viewers to have a look at.
yeah.
Towards the end, obviously, very wholesome ending.
Mm.
Um, I'm going to pose a question to you. Obviously, Randy, so the main character, or Randall, um, he's obviously quite a bad guy, but in the end, he gets sent to a trailer
Yeah,
in the woods
caravan. Yeah.
where he is repeatedly beat up with a shovel by two strangers.
Yeah.
And now I pose the question to you, Jaden. Does he deserve such torture?
Yes, 100%. He tried to kill this little kid. Are you kidding me?
Yes, fair enough. Fair enough.
The funny thing
It
about
is.
that scene, though, that scene is actually a reference to A Bug's Life, which is also another Pixar film.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that caravan appears in that scene, in the film, I should say. So yeah, that's a reference to that. And beside the caravan, you might have noticed as well, is the iconic Pizza Planet truck, which you've also seen in
Oh,
Toy
I
Story.
missed that
You
one
missed it?
again.
Yeah, it was right there in front of you. I can't believe you
Oh,
missed that.
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What I didn't miss though, and what I think is very hard to miss, is that Boo has a Jessie doll.
Mm-hmm.
So I did notice that. And obviously there's a Pixar ball in her room, and
Lux.
there's references galore in this
Yeah.
movie. For sure, but I really like the final sort of like the final chase there
Mm-hmm.
when they're like on the conveyor belt
Yeah.
thing, which is actually very reminiscent of Toy Story 2, might I add, where they're like jumping around all these different moving things in this massive like warehouse of doors.
Yeah, in the conveyor belts with all the suitcases.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and but I love the scene where they go through different doors, and sometimes they're like in Paris, and like I
Yeah.
think there's one on like a tropical island,
Mm.
and all that. And speaking of which, we get a cameo from the abominable snowman.
Yep.
So that is John Ratzenberger, who is
Yeah.
literally in every
He's in
single
every
Pixar movie
Pixar
ever.
film. Yeah.
Yeah, so Toy Story, Incredibles, Wall-E, like all of them.
Yeah, I think he's done like
He,
Ham from Toy Story and such.
yeah, and he's Mac in Cars, and yeah, he's everywhere. So it's cool to hear him again.
Yeah.
But yeah, so overall, I mean, were you happy that this sort of like got a prequel? Did it deserve to get a prequel? I think it probably did.
Yeah, when I first watched the prequel, I quite liked it actually. And like I said before, I do think that doing a prequel to the film was the responsible way to go, because this film
Yeah,
ended, in a bittersweet way. It was kind of done well. And I think just leaving it how it is probably the best way to go. So yeah, I do think
for
the
sure.
prequel was a great way to go, but they could have also just left it as it was, and it would have been great as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think this movie was like one of the most top grossing animation movies of all time, and the prequel was too, which shows that obviously people
Oh,
like
wow.
this movie.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
And fair enough. So we mentioned at the start, in 2001, there were two big animation movies released. One of them was Monsters, Inc. The other one was Shrek. So I put the question to you, Jaden, which is better and why?
Well, I don't want to reveal my rating without.
Oh, okay. Perhaps we'll go to after then. I'll say first generally that I think the comedy is better in Shrek, but perhaps we'll get to that more after the music segment.
Yeah. Well, I'll do it now, but yeah. So in terms of whether Shrek or Monsters Inc. is better, I'm probably gonna have to say Monsters Inc. because I like Shrek 2 more, and I do think that it's closer to Monsters Inc. in terms of like a rating. But no, I just feel like Monsters Inc. has better, like a better story overall. It's different,
Okay.
it's unique. And at the time that I was watching the film when I was young, I probably enjoyed Monsters Inc. a tiny bit more. But
Okay.
now that I've grown up and thought about it, Shrek also has the humor that's better for me. But in terms of like a story and film and characters, I'd probably go with Monsters Inc.
Fair enough. I'm going to go against you there, though. I think
Yep.
for me, I think it's probably a nostalgia factor. I was never really a major fan of the Monsters Inc. movies, but I definitely remember watching Shrek 1 and Shrek 2 as a kid.
Okay.
I think I remember seeing Monsters Inc. maybe once, but I remember Shrek was a favorite.
Yeah.
And so we owned that one on VHS or whatever it was back in the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that definitely a nostalgia factor coming in there, but I definitely recognize that this is a fantastic movie.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, let's go to the music segment. So what song are we adding in to the Rewatch playlist this week?
Well, I think
only have
clear what
only
we
have
should
one.
I think I've got another one if you want to add it in, but
Okay, yeah, I'm down for that.
yeah. So obviously the theme, Monsters Inc. is probably going to go in there. I hope that's what you put in there.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, we see it in the starting credits, right at the start of the film, which is also composed by Randy Newman, which is just great. I think he did all of this stuff on this film. But in addition to that, I think also the music that played at the end when we see Boo going back to her home, I think that was done quite well. And I think that's called Boo's Going Home, which is also by Randy Newman. I think that might deserve the second spot just to fill it up. That was also quite a good composition there.
Awesome. No, I'm down for that. So the Boo song was sort of like a background supporting, like, bringing out those emotions in the scene sort of song.
I think that's what made the ending scene so emotional, is the music to go along with it.
Oh, awesome. All right, sweet. So those are the two songs going into the Rewatch playlist. If you're wondering what on earth that is, you can visit the link in the YouTube video description. It's just a Spotify playlist of some of the songs we've encountered along our season 1 journey. Some bangers in there, so go check it out. All right, let's go to final thoughts then. What did you think of this movie in general? And give us a tier rating, and we'll get to see whether it's above Shrek or not.
Rightio. Okay. Overall, I really love Monsters Inc., and I think it's one of the best stories that Pixar has ever produced. And like you've said,
big statement.
That's a big statement, I know. And like you've said before, you just don't get this from Pixar's characters anymore. It's just something about that time era, with Toy Story, and I know it's not from Pixar, but Shrek, and Monsters Inc., and Cars. Those sort of earlier films, Pixar was just putting everything in those films and their characters and such. You just don't get that anymore. It's kind of, and the nostalgia from this film kind of made it better for me as well, because I watched this when I was a little kid. I think it came out 2001, like you said. The characters are just great, and the chemistry between Mike and Sully and Boo just works really well. And you don't need anything more than those three characters to make a film. And something about those three characters, that sort of I want to say trilogy of characters, is just great. It's simple and it's efficient, but it's just different from everything else at the time, which Pixar always lives up to. They make unique stuff, and they're still doing that. They're still making unique stuff, which I love from the that film studio. And the music is great in this as well, and the animation for the time, although it's probably doesn't live up to what we see today, I think it was terrific for when it came out. And for all those reasons, I do feel that it deserves like an A- rating, which is quite significantly higher than what I rated Shrek, which I think was a B.
Okay, awesome. No, I agree with everything you've said there. In fact, my rating is going to be the exact same. I was going to go for, I was thinking when I was watching this, it's either going to be an A or an A-.
That's what I was thinking as well, yeah.
Yeah, and when I was thinking about putting it on the A, I was thinking sort of like the ramifications of that. I'm thinking, what other Pixar movies really deserve that A spot?
That's what I was thinking as well, yeah.
Quite a few come to mind, and I think those edge out Monsters Inc.
Just the tiny
quite a bit. Yeah. So for me, it's like not as good as some of those other ones, but it's still obviously a really, really good movie, and definitely deserves a rewatch. So obviously most people probably haven't seen this movie in a while. And so if you've got Disney Plus, it's on there.
Check it out.
Go back, have a watch. Yeah, it's a good time. So A- from the both of us today. All right. Thank you for listening, everybody, to this episode of the Rewatch podcast. If you'd like to follow us on Instagram, you can do so at the Rewatch Pod. Jaden, what are we going to do for our next episode, bro?
Oh, God. What are we going to
do? Should we do Marvel? Should we do Star Wars? Should we throw it to the audience?
Let's throw it to the audience again. Let's chuck up some major franchises like DC, Marvel, Star Wars, and let's see what they want.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's cool. That's cool. All right, so so that Instagram thing will
Instagram
come out
poll come
in
out
the
soon.
past. It'll come out in the past.
Yeah.
For the viewers watching this.
Oh, that's weird to
So
say, isn't
if you're watching this, you missed out, my friend.
it?
So if you've got a time machine, go back a couple of days. Maybe we'll do it on the Wednesday. Travel back then, and fix all of the world events and create world peace and stuff first. But before you do that, travel back to Wednesday, vote on that poll, and you'll decide.
What we'll be doing.
You'll decide what we do next week. Right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. As always, we all appreciate the support very much. And by the way, if you'd like to come on the Rewatch podcast, just let us know.
Yes.
Harry came on last week, and he just had like an Apple earphones, like microphone.
Yeah.
So
it doesn't matter what software you use. We'll be accommodating. Yeah. We won't chuck you out.
Yeah, we'll accommodate everybody's needs. Everybody is welcome here.
Yeah.
So thanks for listening, everybody. Bye for now.
See ya.